The crack of a gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Ordway, Colorado, as Sophia Winters sprinted for her life, her breath coming in ragged gasps and her golden hair streaming behind her like a flag in the wind. The year was 1879, and in that moment, as the bullet tore through her back, time seemed to slow to a crawl. Sophia felt the searing pain bloom between her shoulder blades, a hot poker of agony that robbed her of breath. Her legs faltered, and she knew she was falling, plummeting toward the hard, packed earth. But instead of the cruel ground, she fell into strong arms that caught her with surprising gentleness. "I've got you, miss," said a deep voice, thick with concern. "Stay with me now." Through the haze of pain, Sophia gazed up into the face of a stranger, a handsome cowboy with intense green eyes and a determined set to his jaw. His hat had fallen back, revealing dark hair touched by the sun, and as consciousness began to slip away from her, Sophia's last thought was that she'd never seen anyone look at her with such fierce protectiveness. Thomas Summers had only been in Ordway for 2 days when he witnessed the shooting. He'd been tying his horse outside the general store when he heard the commotion, a woman's frightened cry followed by the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. Without thinking, he'd sprinted toward the noise, rounding the corner just in time to see a blonde woman running for her life and a man in a dark coat raising his pistol. Thomas had shouted a warning, but it was too late. The gun had fired, and the woman had jerked forward, wounded. Pure instinct had propelled Thomas forward, and he'd caught her just before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest as her blood soaked through his shirt. "Help!" Thomas roared, looking around wildly. "This woman's been shot. I need a doctor." People began to emerge from doorways, cautiously at first, then with growing urgency as they saw the wounded woman in the cowboy's arms. Thomas scanned the faces, desperate to find someone who could help. "Doc Patterson's place is down the street," called an elderly man, pointing toward a whitewashed building with a small sign. "Second house past the barber." Thomas didn't wait for further instructions. Lifting Sophia fully into his arms, he ran toward the doctor's house, each step jostling her wounded body and leaving a trail of blood droplets in the dust. Behind him, he could hear shouts as townspeople pursued the shooter, but Thomas's only concern was the pale woman in his arms, her breathing growing shallower with each passing second. "Don't you die on me," he muttered, his boots pounding against the dirt road. "You stay with me, you hear? I didn't catch you just to lose you now." Dr. Patterson was a man in his 60s with spectacles and a trim gray beard. He took one look at the blood-soaked pair on his doorstep and ushered them inside, his experienced hands already reaching for Sophia as Thomas carried her through the door. "Put her on the table," the doctor commanded, gesturing to a wooden examination table in the center of his front room. "Face down. Tell me what happened while I cut away her dress." Thomas gently laid Sophia on the table, arranging her so the wound was accessible. She was running from someone. "Man in a dark coat shot her in the back. I didn't see his face clearly." The doctor worked quickly, using scissors to cut through Sophia's dress and corset, exposing the angry wound that pumped blood with each of her heartbeats. "The bullet's still in there. You'll need to help me hold her down while I extract it. She's unconscious now, but the pain might wake her." Thomas nodded grimly, positioning himself at Sophia's head and shoulders, ready to keep her still. As the doctor probed the wound with forceps, Sophia's eyes flew open and she screamed a sound of pure agony that Thomas felt in his very bones. "Easy now," he soothed, holding her firmly but gently. "The doctor's helping you. You've been shot, but you're going to be all right." Sophia's wild eyes found his, filled with pain and confusion. "Who?" She managed to gasp before another wave of pain overwhelmed her. "Name's Thomas Summers," he said, trying to keep her focused on his face rather than what the doctor was doing. "And I won't let anything else happen to you." "That's a promise." Her fingers clutched at his arm with surprising strength. "Sophia," she whispered. "Sophia Winters." Then her eyes rolled back and she mercifully lost consciousness again. "Got it," Dr. Patterson announced, holding up a bloody bullet. "The wound isn't as deep as I feared. Missed her spine and major organs from what I can tell. She's lost blood, but with proper care, she should recover." Relief washed over Thomas like cool water. He hadn't realized how invested he'd already become in this woman's survival. "What can I do to help?" "She needs somewhere safe to recover," the doctor said, already cleaning and dressing the wound. "Whoever shot her might try again. You know her?" Thomas shook his head. "Never seen her before today." "Well, she can't stay here," Patterson said. "My wife's sister is arriving tomorrow and we haven't the space. The hotel in town isn't secure enough if someone's hunting her." Thomas didn't hesitate. "I've rented a cabin just outside town. It's small, but it's private. She can recover there." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "That's mighty generous, offering your home to a stranger." "Someone shot her in broad daylight," Thomas replied, his jaw set. "I aim to find out why and make sure they don't get a second chance." While Dr. Patterson finished bandaging Sophia's wound, the town sheriff arrived, a stocky man named Henry Miller with a salt and pepper mustache and weary eyes. "Heard we had a shooting," he said, removing his hat as he entered. "Miss OK, she will be," the doctor answered. "Thanks to this young man's quick action." The sheriff turned to Thomas. "You saw what happened." Thomas recounted the events again, describing the shooter as best he could, though in truth, he'd been more focused on reaching Sophia than on memorizing the gunman's features. "Dark coat, medium build, maybe 35 or 40 years old," Thomas finished. "Had a hat pulled low. I wouldn't recognize his face, but I'd know his walk. He limped slightly on his right leg." The sheriff nodded, making notes. "And the young lady, anyone know who she is?" "Said her name's Sophia Winters before she passed out again," Thomas replied. "That's all I know. Winters." The sheriff's brow furrowed. "Don't recall anyone by that name in Ordway. Must be passing through." He tucked his notebook away. "I'll ask around town, see if anyone knows more about her or the shooter. Where will she be staying during her recovery?" When Thomas explained his offer of the cabin, Sheriff Miller gave him a long, appraising look. "You always take in strange women who get themselves shot, Mr. Summers." "Only on Tuesdays," Thomas replied dryly. "Rest of the week I leave 'em where they fall." The sheriff's mustache twitched. "Watch yourself. We don't know who she is or what kind of trouble follows her." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "I'll send Deputy Clark out to your cabin tomorrow to take her statement if she's able." After the sheriff departed, Thomas and Dr. Patterson carefully transferred the still unconscious Sophia to a wagon. The doctor provided clean bandages, laudanum for pain, and strict instructions for her care. "Keep the wound clean, change the dressing twice daily," Patterson said. "If fever sets in or the wound shows signs of infection, redness, swelling, discharge, bring her back immediately. Otherwise, keep her still and resting for at least a week." Thomas nodded, committing the instructions to memory. "How long will she be unconscious? Hard to say. The body has its own wisdom. Could be hours, could be until morning. The important thing is keeping her comfortable and safe." The journey to Thomas's cabin took less than 30 minutes, but to Thomas, holding the wounded woman steady as the wagon bumped over uneven ground, it felt much longer. Every jolt caused Sophia to moan softly in her unconscious state, and each sound twisted something in Thomas's chest. The cabin was modest, just one main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, a bed in the corner, and a table with 2 chairs. It wasn't much, but it was clean and secure, with sturdy locks on the door and shutters for the windows. Thomas carefully laid Sophia on his bed, then built up the fire to ward off the evening chill. As darkness fell, he sat in a chair beside the bed, his Winchester rifle across his knees, and watched over the mysterious woman whose life had become entangled with his own through a single act of violence. He studied her face in the flickering firelight, the high cheekbones, the straight nose, the generous mouth now pulled tight with pain even in unconsciousness. She was beautiful, but there was something else about her face, a strength, a determination that showed even now. Who was she? Why had someone tried to kill her? And what would happen when she woke to find herself in a stranger's cabin, miles from town? Thomas didn't know the answers, but as he settled in for his vigil, he made a silent vow to protect this woman until she was well enough to protect herself and maybe, if she'd let him, to help her face whatever danger had brought that bullet to her back. The night passed slowly. Thomas dozed in the chair, waking at every small sound, the pop of the fire, the call of an owl outside, the soft moans that occasionally escaped Sophia's lips. Twice he checked her bandage, relieved to find only a small amount of fresh blood had seeped through. Near dawn, Sophia finally stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, confusion clouding her gaze until it settled on Thomas, who had moved to sit on the edge of the bed when he noticed her waking. "Where?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "My cabin outside Ordway," Thomas answered gently. "I'm Thomas Summers." "Do you remember being shot?" Sophia tried to move, then gasped as pain lanced through her. "Yes," she managed. "You caught me." Thomas nodded. "Dr. Patterson removed the bullet, said you'll recover with time and rest." He offered her a cup of water, carefully supporting her head so she could drink. "Do you feel strong enough to tell me why someone was shooting at you?" Sophia took several sips before answering. "It's a long story," she said, her voice slightly stronger, "and not a pretty one." "I've got time," Thomas replied, "and I've seen my share of ugly." Sophia studied him for a long moment as if weighing her options. Finally, she sighed. "His name is Victor Holloway. He's a wealthy man from Denver who believes I've taken something that belongs to him." "And did you?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Yes, myself." At Thomas's puzzled expression, she continued, "I was his companion, paid to be seen on his arm to entertain his business associates to warm his bed." She spoke matter-of-factly, but Thomas could see the shame behind her eyes. "You left him," Thomas said, understanding dawning. Sophia nodded weakly. 3 months ago. I'd saved enough money to start fresh somewhere new, Victor. He doesn't let go of things easily, especially things he considers his property." "You're not property," Thomas said firmly, anger flaring at this unknown man. "No one is." "Victor disagrees," Sophia replied. "He's been tracking me. I thought I'd lost him when I reached Ordway." She closed her eyes briefly. "I was wrong." Thomas absorbed this information, his jaw tightening. "The sheriff's looking into the shooting. I can go to him, tell him about this Holloway." "No." Sophia's eyes flew open, and she tried to sit up, only to fall back with a cry of pain. "Victor has connections everywhere. Judges, lawmen, money buys all sorts of friends. If he knows I've survived, if he thinks I've told anyone about him." Thomas gently pressed her shoulder back against the pillow. "Easy now, you'll tear your stitches." He considered her words. "All right. No sheriff for now, but you need time to heal, and I need to know what we're up against." "Is Holloway still in town? Will he keep looking for you?" "He'll assume I'm dead or close to it," Sophia said after a moment's thought. "But he's thorough. He might stay a day or two to confirm." "Then we lie low," Thomas decided. "No one knows you're here except the doctor and the sheriff, and neither struck me as men who'd sell you out. Sophia looked around the cabin, really seeing it for the first time. "This is your home," she said softly. "I've brought danger to your door. I should leave as soon as I'm able." Thomas shook his head firmly. "You'll stay until you're healed. After that, well, we'll figure it out then." He stood up. "You should rest more. I'll fix us some breakfast when you wake again." Sophia caught his hand as he turned away, her touch surprisingly warm despite her ordeal. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. I could be lying about everything." Thomas looked down at their joined hands, then met her gaze steadily. "Could be," he agreed, "but my pa taught me to judge folks by their actions, not their words. And right now, what I see is a woman who's been hurt and hunted, who deserves a chance to heal in peace." He gently extracted his hand. "Rest now, Miss Winters. You're safe here." As Thomas moved away to stoke the fire, he didn't see the tears that welled in Sophia's eyes, or the way she watched him with a mixture of gratitude and wonder before exhaustion claimed her once more. Over the next 3 days, Sophia's strength gradually returned. The wound in her back remained painful, but the fever Dr. Patterson had warned about never materialized, and the edges of the injury began to knit cleanly together. Thomas proved to be an attentive caretaker, changing her bandages with careful hands, preparing simple but nourishing meals, and helping her move from the bed to a chair by the fire when she grew restless from lying down. During those days, they talked. At first, their conversations were cautious, each revealing only surface details of their lives. But as Sophia's trust in Thomas grew, so did her willingness to share her story. "I wasn't always." She hesitated, searching for words as they sat by the fire on the evening of the 3rd day. "A companion," Thomas supplied gently. Sophia nodded, her fingers idly tracing patterns on the quilt that covered her lap. "My father owned a small ranch near Pueblo. Nothing grand, but it was enough for us, me, Pa, and my younger brother James. Ma died when I was 12. She gazed into the flames, memories playing across her face. "When I was 19, a bad winter killed most of our cattle. Pa took a loan to rebuild the herd." Thomas didn't interrupt, sensing she needed to tell this story in her own way. "The bank foreclosed the next year. Pa couldn't make the payments. The night we lost the ranch, her voice caught. He took his own life, left me and James with nothing but debts." Thomas's hand found hers, offering silent support. James was only 16. "I tried to find honest work, but there wasn't much for a woman with no husband and no skills beyond ranching. Then I met Victor." Her voice hardened slightly. "He offered a solution: fine clothes, a place to live, money to send James to school back east. All I had to do was—" She let the sentence hang unfinished. "You were protecting your brother," Thomas said with no judgment in his voice. "I told myself that," Sophia agreed. "And for a while it wasn't so bad. Victor was generous in his way, but over time he became controlling, possessive. If I spoke to another man, even a shopkeeper, there would be consequences." She unconsciously touched a spot near her collarbone, and Thomas suspected there was a scar there, hidden by her clothing. "How did you get away?" he asked. "Carefully," Sophia said with a grim smile. "I saved what I could, a little at a time. James finished school and found work as a clerk in Boston, so he no longer needed my support. When Victor went to Chicago on business for 2 weeks, I seized my chance." Her eyes met Thomas's. "I've been running ever since. 3 months, always looking over my shoulder." "And now?" Thomas asked quietly. "Now I don't know," Sophia admitted. "I had planned to keep moving west, maybe all the way to California, start fresh where no one knows me." She glanced around the cabin. "But I never expected this. Someone helping me without wanting anything in return." Thomas was silent for a moment, considering her words. Then he asked, What would you do if you weren't running, if you could choose any life? The question seemed to surprise Sophia. She looked at him thoughtfully before answering. I'd want a small place of my own, nothing fancy, maybe a garden. I'd like to work with my hands again, growing things, making things. A wistful smile touched her lips. I miss the simplicity of that life. Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's not so different from what I want. And what's your story, Thomas Summers? Sophia asked, turning the conversation away from herself. Why are you in a cabin outside Ordway, Colorado, taking in wounded strangers? Thomas leaned back in his chair, stretching his long legs toward the fire. No great tragedy like yours, he said. I grew up in Texas, worked cattle most of my life, rode with a few outfits, saved my wages. Last year I decided I wanted land of my own, somewhere with good water and grass. Been traveling, looking for the right place. Is Ordway the right place? Sophia asked. Thomas shrugged. Might be. There's a small spread for sale about 10 miles north of here, 160 acres with a creek running through it. Price is fair. I was planning to look it over this week before. He gestured toward Sophia with a small smile. Before I complicated your life, she finished for him. I'm sorry about that. Don't be, Thomas replied simply. Some complications are worth it. Their eyes met across the small space between them, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Two people seeking peace, a place to belong, a life built on their own terms. The moment was broken by the sound of hoofbeats approaching the cabin. Immediately, Thomas was on his feet, reaching for his rifle. Stay here, he told Sophia, moving quickly to the window. Peering through a small gap in the shutters, he relaxed slightly. It's just the deputy the sheriff mentioned come to take your statement, I reckon. Sophia's face had gone pale. What should I tell him? That depends, Thomas said, setting his rifle aside but keeping it within reach. Do you trust the law to help you? Sophia hesitated, then shook her head. Victor has too much influence, if word gets back to him that I'm alive and talking. Thomas nodded in understanding. Then we keep it simple. You were attacked by a stranger, didn't see his face clearly, have no idea why anyone would want to harm you. A knock sounded at the door. Thomas waited until Sophia had composed herself, sitting up straighter and arranging the quilt to cover her nightgown, one of Thomas's shirts, actually, which was all they'd had after cutting away her blood-soaked dress. Deputy Clark was young, perhaps 25, with an earnest face and a nervous habit of adjusting his badge. He removed his hat when Thomas introduced Sophia and spoke with gentle deference as he asked her about the shooting. Sophia played her part perfectly, describing the attack with just enough detail to be believable while claiming no knowledge of her assailant's identity or motive. She portrayed herself as a widow traveling to join relatives in California, an innocent victim of random violence. The deputy seemed to accept her story, though Thomas noticed his eyes lingering on the fine quality of Sophia's hair, combed the one item of value she'd managed to keep with her, tucked into her hair on the day of the shooting. Sheriff says the man who shot you has left town, Clark informed them as he prepared to leave. Checked out of the hotel the morning after the shooting, according to the clerk, rode west. Thomas and Sophia exchanged a quick glance. If Holloway had left, it likely meant he believed Sophia was dead, which gave them a temporary reprieve at least. Thank you, Deputy, Sophia said with a convincing smile. It's a relief to know he's gone. After Clark departed, Thomas stepped outside to ensure the deputy had truly left, then returned to find Sophia attempting to stand on her own, gripping the back of her chair for support. What are you doing? He asked, rushing to her side. Testing my strength, she replied through gritted teeth. If Holloway thinks I'm dead, This is my chance to get far away before he learns otherwise. Thomas frowned, slipping an arm around her waist to steady her. You're nowhere near ready to travel. The doctor said at least a week of complete rest, and it's only been 3 days. Sophia looked up at him, frustration evident in her eyes. Every day I stay puts you in more danger. If Holloway somehow discovers I'm alive, if he tracks me here, then I'll deal with him, Thomas said firmly. He guided her back to the bed despite her protests. Sophia, listen to me. You can barely stand. You'd never survive a long journey in your condition. I've survived worse, she argued, but allowed herself to be settled on the bed. I don't doubt it, Thomas replied, his voice softening. But you don't have to this time. Let yourself heal properly. We'll figure out the rest as it comes. Sophia studied his face for a long moment. Why do you care so much? You could have handed me off to the doctor and been done with it. Thomas sat beside her on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. When I saw you get shot when I caught you, something changed. I can't explain it properly. He rubbed the back of his neck, uncomfortable with expressing such feelings but determined to be honest. I felt responsible for you, yes, but it's more than that. I feel connected to you somehow. Sophia's expression softened. I feel it too, she admitted quietly, but that's all the more reason I should leave. People who get close to me tend to get hurt. I can take care of myself, Thomas assured her, and right now my priority is making sure you heal properly. He stood up, his tone becoming more practical. Now I need to go into town for supplies. Will you promise to stay put and rest while I'm gone? Sophia sighed, then nodded reluctantly. I promise, but Thomas. She caught his hand, her fingers warm against his skin. Be careful in town. Holloway might have left men behind or paid for information. I'll keep my eyes open, he promised. Lock the door behind me and my rifle's loaded if you need it. As Thomas rode toward Ordway, his thoughts remained with the woman in his cabin. In just a few days, Sophia Winters had come to occupy a significant place in his mind, and if he was honest with himself, his heart as well. There was something about her resilience, her quiet strength, the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide that drew him to her in a way he'd never experienced before. The fact that she was running from a dangerous man only strengthened his resolve to protect her. Thomas had never considered himself particularly heroic, but the thought of Sophia facing Victor Holloway alone made his blood boil. In town, Thomas maintained a casual demeanor while remaining vigilant. He purchased food, ammunition, and a ready-made dress from the general store that he hoped would fit Sophia. The storekeeper's wife helped him select it, raising an eyebrow at a single man buying women's clothing but refraining from comment when Thomas mentioned it was for a wounded relative recovering at his cabin. At the saloon, Thomas nursed a single beer while listening to the local gossip. The shooting was still a topic of conversation, but details had already become muddled in the retelling. Some claimed the woman had died, others that she'd been spirited away by the mysterious cowboy who'd caught her. No one mentioned the name Holloway, or seemed particularly interested in finding the shooter now that he'd left town. Thomas was about to leave when he overheard a conversation between the bartender and a well-dressed man he didn't recognize. Asking about a blonde woman, the stranger was saying, sliding a coin across the bar. Pretty in her 20s, might have been using the name Winters. Thomas tensed but kept his back to the pair, pretending to focus on his beer. Only blonde woman I've heard about lately got herself shot in the street 4 days ago, the bartender replied, pocketing the coin. Don't know if she lived or died. Sheriff's been tight-lipped about it. Interesting, the stranger murmured. And the shooter left town from what I hear. Headed west. The stranger ordered a whiskey, then asked, the woman who was shot, anyone know where she is now? Thomas didn't wait to hear the answer. Leaving some coins on the table, he slipped out of the saloon and hurried to his horse. If Holloway had sent someone to ask questions, it meant he wasn't convinced Sophia was dead, which meant they had less time than they'd thought. Riding back to the cabin, Thomas's mind raced with possibilities. Should they leave immediately, despite Sophia's condition? Hide somewhere else? Confront Holloway's men directly? He was so preoccupied with these thoughts that he almost missed the sign of trouble hoofprints in the soft earth near the cabin, fresh ones that hadn't been there when he left. Immediately alert, Thomas dismounted and tied his horse some distance away, then approached on foot, drawing his revolver. As he neared the cabin, he heard voices Sophia's, high with tension, and a man's, unfamiliar and threatening. "Mr. Holloway will be very pleased to learn you survived," the male voice was saying. "He's been most distressed, thinking he'd lost you permanently." "Tell Victor he can go to hell," Sophia replied, her voice steady despite its heightened pitch. "I'd rather die than go back to him." "That can be arranged," the man said coldly. "Though Mr. Holloway would prefer you alive, he has unfinished business with you." Thomas reached the window, peering carefully through a gap in the shutters. Inside, Sophia stood backed against the far wall, Thomas's rifle in her hands but wavering slightly as she aimed it at a tall, lean man in a dark suit. Even from this angle, Thomas could see that Sophia was pale and unsteady, clearly straining to remain upright. "I'll shoot you if you come any closer," Sophia warned, but the man merely laughed. "You can barely stand, my dear. I doubt you could hit me if you tried." He took a step forward. "Now be reasonable. Put down the gun, and I'll make sure your journey back to Denver is as comfortable as possible." Thomas had heard enough. Moving silently to the door, he tested it unlocked. The man inside had either picked the lock or forced Sophia to open it. Taking a deep breath, Thomas burst through the door, his revolver aimed squarely at the intruder. "Step away from her," Thomas commanded, his voice hard as steel. The man spun around, revealing a narrow face with close-set eyes and a thin mustache. His hand moved toward his jacket, but Thomas cocked his revolver pointedly. "I wouldn't," Thomas warned. "Hands where I can see them." The man complied, raising his hands slowly. "This is a private matter between the lady and her employer," he said smoothly. "It doesn't concern you." "Seems to concern me plenty, since you're trespassing in my home and threatening my friend," Thomas replied, moving carefully to position himself between the man and Sophia. "Who are you?" "Lawrence Barton," the man answered with a slight bow, as if they were being introduced at a social gathering. "I work for Mr. Victor Holloway. I've come to escort Miss Winters back to Denver where she belongs." "She doesn't belong to anyone," Thomas said evenly. "And she's not going anywhere with you." Barton's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Holloway is a powerful man, Cowboy. He doesn't take kindly to interference in his affairs." "And I don't take kindly to men who shoot women in the back," Thomas countered. "Was that your handiwork, Barton?" The man's expression flickered briefly. "A regrettable necessity," Miss Winters proved. Difficult to persuade through conventional means. Behind Thomas, Sophia made a small, distressed sound. He could feel her presence at his back, the rifle barrel now resting against his shoulder as she used it to support herself. "Here's what's going to happen," Thomas said, his voice deadly quiet. "You're going to leave. You're going to tell Holloway that Sophia died from her wounds, and neither you nor anyone else who works for him is ever going to come looking for her again." Barton's thin lips curled into a sneer. "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't," Thomas replied, "I'll kill you right here, right now, and bury your body where no one will ever find it." There was no bluster in his tone, only cold certainty. "And if Holloway sends someone else, I'll do the same to them, and if he comes himself." Thomas smiled without humor. Well, I'd welcome that opportunity. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, the tension in the cabin thick enough to cut. Then Barton's gaze flicked toward the window, calculating. Don't, Thomas advised. You wouldn't make it 3 steps. Barton's shoulders sagged slightly in defeat. You're making a grave mistake, he said, his voice tight with anger. Mr. Holloway doesn't forgive slights. Neither do I, Thomas replied. Now get out. Your horse is tied at the south end of the clearing. Ride north and don't look back. Thomas kept his revolver trained on Barton as the man backed slowly toward the door. At the threshold, Barton paused, his eyes finding Sophia's over Thomas's shoulder. He'll never stop looking for you, he said, his voice almost pitying. You know that, don't you? You'll never be free of him. I already am, Sophia replied, her voice stronger than it had been. Tell Victor he has no power over me anymore. Barton's mouth tightened, but he said nothing more, slipping out the door and into the gathering dusk. Thomas followed as far as the porch, watching until the man had mounted his horse and ridden away, heading north as instructed. Only when Barton was well out of sight did Thomas holster his weapon and return inside, where he found Sophia slumped against the wall, the rifle now on the floor beside her, her face ashen with exhaustion and stress. Sophia! Thomas rushed to her side, gathering her into his arms. She felt fragile against him, trembling with spent adrenaline. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? She shook her head weakly. No, he just surprised me. I was dozing and then the door opened. Her voice caught. I'm sorry, I should have kept it locked. I thought you'd be back soon, and SHH, Thomas soothed, lifting her gently and carrying her to the bed. It's not your fault. I should never have left you alone. As he settled her on the bed, Thomas noticed a dark stain spreading on the back of her shirt. You've torn your stitches, he said, concern sharp in his voice. Let me see. Carefully, he helped Sophia roll onto her side, then lifted her shirt enough to examine the wound. As he'd feared, some of Dr. Patterson's careful stitches had ripped, and fresh blood was welling from the reopened wound. I need to clean this and bind it tightly, he said, reaching for the medical supplies the doctor had provided. It might hurt. Sophia nodded grimly. Do what you need to do. Thomas worked as gently as possible, cleaning the wound with antiseptic that made Sophia hiss in pain, then applying pressure until the bleeding slowed. He couldn't replace the stitches that would require the doctor's skill, but he could bandage the wound tightly enough to hold it closed until morning. We'll need to get Dr. Patterson out here tomorrow, Thomas said as he secured the bandage. I don't like the look of this. Sophia caught his wrist as he finished. Thomas, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, you know Barton will tell Holloway everything, that I'm alive, that I'm with you. He'll come after both of us now. Thomas covered her hand with his own. Let him come, he said fiercely. I meant what I said, Sophia. I won't let him take you. You don't understand what he's capable of, Sophia insisted. He has money, men, influence, and I have a gun, a good horse, and a woman worth fighting for, Thomas interrupted, his green eyes intense as they held hers. That seems like fair odds to me. Something flickered in Sophia's gaze, surprise, perhaps, or wonder. Why? She asked softly. Why would you risk your life for me? Thomas hesitated, then decided truth was the only answer that mattered. Because in the 4 days since I caught you falling, I've come to care for you more than I thought possible, he said simply. Because you deserve a chance at the life you want, a garden, a small place of your own, peace. And because the thought of you back with that man makes me want to burn the world down. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. I care for you too, she whispered, but I can't ask you to fight my battles. You didn't ask, Thomas pointed out. I offered. He brushed a strand of golden hair from her face, his touch tender. But right now you need to rest. We'll figure out our next move in the morning. Sophia's eyelids were already growing heavy, the combination of pain, blood loss, and emotional exhaustion taking its toll. "Stay with me," she murmured as sleep began to claim her. "Always," Thomas promised, settling himself in the chair beside her bed, his revolver within easy reach. As Sophia drifted into sleep, he kept watch, his mind working through their options. By dawn, Thomas had made his decision. They couldn't stay at the cabin, it wasn't defensible enough, and Holloway now knew where to find them. They needed a new sanctuary, somewhere Holloway's men wouldn't think to look. The moment Sophia woke, Thomas outlined his plan. "The ranch I mentioned, the one for sale north of here. The owners have already moved on, but the house is still furnished. It's remote with good sightlines in all directions. No one would expect us there. But your supplies, your things," Sophia began, "can be replaced," Thomas said firmly. "What can't be replaced is you." He sat beside her on the bed. "Sophia, I need you to be strong for just a little longer. Can you ride? The journey's about 3 hours. Sophia pushed herself up to sitting, wincing but determined. "I can ride, just help me stand." Thomas sent for Dr. Patterson before they departed, using a local boy who delivered supplies to summon the physician. The doctor arrived promptly, frowning at Sophia's reopened wound, but understanding the urgency of their situation once Thomas explained about Barton's visit. "Riding will be painful," Patterson warned as he replaced the torn stitches. "But if you're determined to go, at least the wound is clean. Change the bandage daily and try not to pull these stitches again." He handed Thomas a bottle of laudanum for the pain during the journey. They left as soon as Sophia was stitched and dressed in the new clothes. Thomas had purchased a simple blue dress that was slightly too large but serviceable. Thomas helped her onto his most gentle mare, then mounted his own stallion. They rode north, taking a circuitous route through wooded areas whenever possible to minimize their visibility. The journey was hard on Sophia. Though she never complained, Thomas could see the pain in her tight expression, in the way she gripped the saddle horn with white-knuckled intensity. Twice they stopped so she could rest, and Thomas gave her small sips of laudanum to dull the worst of the agony. By mid-afternoon, they crested a small hill, and the ranch spread out before them, a modest house with a barn and corral, nestled in a valley with a creek winding through it. The land around it was good pasture, dotted with cottonwoods and bisected by split-rail fences in need of some repair. "It's beautiful," Sophia breathed, the first words she'd spoken in over an hour. "It could be home," Thomas said quietly, watching her face. "For both of us, if you wanted." Sophia turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. "Thomas, I know it's sudden," he hurried on. "I know we've only known each other a few days, but sometimes life shows you your path in the strangest ways." He reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "I'm not asking for promises, Sophia. Just a chance. Stay with me here and see if this could be the place you've been looking for." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, but a smile broke through them like sunshine after rain. "I'd like that," she whispered. "Very much." The house was dusty from disuse, but otherwise in good condition. A simple 2-bedroom structure with a large kitchen and a comfortable sitting room. While Sophia rested on a sofa, Thomas hastily cleared of dust covers. He secured the house, checking locks on doors and windows, planning defensive positions, unloading the supplies they'd brought. That evening, as they sat before a fire Thomas had built in the stone fireplace, Sophia asked the question that had been on both their minds. "What do we do about Holloway?" Thomas considered before answering. "We have a few options. We could keep running, always staying one step ahead. We could try to reason with him, offer him money to leave you alone." His jaw tightened. "Or we could stand our ground and fight if it comes to that." He won't be reasoned with, Sophia said with certainty, and I'm tired of running. She looked around the room, then back to Thomas. I want to stay here. I want to build something real. Her voice strengthened with resolve. If Holloway comes, we'll face him together. Thomas nodded, pride and admiration swelling in his chest. Together, he agreed. The next 2 weeks passed in relative peace. Sophia's wound healed steadily, and her strength returned more quickly than Thomas had dared hope. Soon she was able to move about the house freely, even venturing outside to sit on the porch and breathe the clean mountain air. During this time, Thomas rode into town only once, to formally purchase the ranch. He paid in cash, using most of his savings, and registered the deed in both his name and Sophia's, an act that raised the bank manager's eyebrows, but generated no comment. While in Ordway, Thomas kept alert for any sign of Holloway's men, but the town seemed quiet, undisturbed by outside influences. As April turned to May, Sophia began to help with small chores around the ranch, cooking meals, planting a kitchen garden, mending clothes. They fell into an easy rhythm together, working side by side during the day and talking late into the evening, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for their future. Their growing feelings for each other remained largely unspoken but were evident in every glance, every casual touch, every shared smile. Thomas found himself watching Sophia when she wasn't looking, the way sunlight caught in her golden hair, the graceful movements of her hands as she worked, the determination in her profile as she tackled a difficult task. For her part, Sophia seemed to bloom in the safety of the ranch, gradually shedding the wariness that had become second nature during her months on the run. She laughed more easily, spoke more freely, and began to look toward the future with hope rather than fear. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, Thomas finally gave voice to what had been growing between them. "I'm falling in love with you," he said simply, his eyes on the distant mountains. "I know it's fast, and I know you have reasons to be cautious, but I wanted you to know." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, so long that Thomas began to fear he'd overstepped. Then her hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "I fell in love with you the day you caught me," she replied softly. "When I was falling, when I thought I was dying, and I looked up into your eyes." She turned to face him. "I saw something I'd never seen before, someone who would catch me, not just my body, but all of me." Thomas reached up to touch her cheek, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I'll always catch you," he promised, "for as long as you'll let me." Their first kiss was tender, a delicate exploration that quickly deepened into something more passionate, a physical expression of the bond that had formed between them through danger and healing, shared confidences and simple daily tasks. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, eyes shining with wonder and desire. "If things were different," Sophia began hesitantly, "if we were just a man and woman who'd met in ordinary circumstances, I'd court you properly," Thomas finished for her. "I'd bring you flowers and take you to dances. I'd ask your father's permission to marry you." Sophia's smile was tinged with sadness. "My father would have liked you, and I'd have liked him," Thomas replied, "but circumstances being what they are." He took both her hands in his. "Sophia Winters, I don't want to wait for some imagined proper time. I want to build a life with you right here, starting now. Will you marry me?" Joy illuminated Sophia's face. "Yes," she said simply. "Nothing would make me happier." Their celebration was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching riders, multiple horses, moving at a steady pace up the road toward the ranch. Instantly alert, Thomas stood, helping Sophia to her feet. "Get inside," he said urgently. "Take the rifle and go to the bedroom at the back of the house. If you hear shooting, I'm not hiding, Sophia interrupted, her voice firm. Not anymore. Whoever it is, we face them together. Her eyes held his, unwavering. You promised. Thomas wanted to argue, to insist on protecting her, but he recognized the steel in her gaze. This was the woman who had survived Victor Holloway, who had endured being shot and hunted, who had never given up despite overwhelming odds. He nodded once, accepting her decision. Together, they moved inside, collecting weapons: Thomas's revolver and rifle, a shotgun they'd found in the house. They positioned themselves near windows with clear views of the approaching road, waiting in tense silence as the riders drew nearer. Through the gathering dusk, Thomas counted 5 men led by a figure on a magnificent black horse. Even at a distance, there was something commanding about the lead rider's posture, and arrogance in the set of his shoulders. Holloway, Sophia whispered, her face pale but resolute. The one in front. Thomas nodded grimly. 5 against 2, not ideal odds. But not impossible, Sophia replied, checking that her shotgun was loaded. Victor isn't much of a fighter himself. He pays others to do his dirty work. Stay out of sight as much as possible, Thomas instructed. Let me do the talking first. Maybe we can resolve this without bloodshed. The riders halted in the yard before the house, spreading out in a semicircle facing the front porch. The lead rider, Holloway, dismounted with fluid grace, handing his reins to one of his men. He was perhaps 45, handsome in a cold way, with silver threading his dark hair and an expensive suit that looked out of place in the rugged landscape. Quaint, he remarked loudly, looking around the ranch with obvious disdain. Though I suppose it suits you, Sophia. Always playing at being a simple country girl, weren't you? Despite all I gave you. Thomas stepped onto the porch, his rifle held casually but ready. Mr. Holloway, I presume. Holloway's eyes narrowed as they fixed on Thomas. And you must be the cowboy who's been harboring my property. Sophia belongs to herself, Thomas replied evenly, and this is private land. You're trespassing. Holloway laughed, a sound without humor. How charmingly naive. Sophia and I have an arrangement. When she broke, when she stole from me and fled, I've simply come to reclaim what's mine. His cold gaze shifted to the doorway behind Thomas, where Sophia now stood, shotgun in hand. Hello, my dear. You're looking well, considering Barton's report of your condition. Leave Victor, Sophia called, her voice steady despite the slight tremor Thomas could see in her hands. There's nothing for you here. On the contrary, Holloway replied smoothly, you're here, and I've gone to considerable expense and trouble to find you. He adjusted his gloves, a casual gesture at odds with the tension of the moment. Now we can do this the easy way or the difficult way. Come with me now, return what you stole, and perhaps I'll be lenient. Refuse and... He gestured toward his men, all of whom had their hands near their weapons. Thomas stepped slightly to the side, blocking Sophia more completely from Holloway's view. She's not going anywhere with you, he said, his voice hardening. This is your only warning, Holloway. Get back on your horse and ride away. Don't come back. Holloway's expression darkened. You don't seem to understand the situation, cowboy. I am not a man accustomed to being denied what I want. He snapped his fingers and his men drew their weapons. Last chance, Sophia. Come peacefully, or watch your latest protector die before you join me anyway. I don't have anything of yours, Victor, Sophia replied, moving to stand beside Thomas despite his attempt to keep her behind him. I took only what was rightfully mine, the money you paid me, the clothes on my back. You took more than that, Holloway snarled, his composure cracking slightly. You took my dignity, my reputation. People whisper that Victor Holloway couldn't keep his woman in line, that she preferred a penniless existence to my generosity. His voice lowered dangerously. No one leaves me, Sophia. No one. Thomas recognized the moment when negotiation became impossible. He saw it in Holloway's eyes, a coldness, a resolve that would accept nothing short of complete victory. Beside him, Sophia tensed, coming to the same realization. "Then I'm sorry it has to end this way," Thomas said quietly. In one fluid motion, he raised his rifle and fired, hitting the man directly to Holloway's right, the one with his gun already half drawn. Chaos erupted. Thomas dove to the side, pulling Sophia with him as bullets splintered the porch railing. They tumbled through the front door, gaining the protection of the house's thick walls. Outside, Holloway was shouting orders as his men spread out, seeking angles to fire into the house. "The windows," Thomas gasped, already crawling toward one of their defensive positions. "Remember the plan." Sophia nodded grimly, moving to her assigned window at the side of the house. Thomas had prepared for this possibility, stacking furniture to create cover near strategic points, giving them protected positions from which to defend the house. The gunfight that followed was brief, but intense. Thomas, firing methodically from his position, managed to wound another of Holloway's men. Sophia, though less experienced with firearms, kept up enough covering fire to prevent the attackers from rushing the house. The tide turned when one of Holloway's men attempted to reach the back door. Sophia, anticipating this move, had shifted position and was waiting. Her shotgun blast caught the man in the shoulder and chest, not killing him but taking him out of the fight. "Holloway," Thomas shouted during a lull in the firing, "you're down to 2 men. Take them and go before more of you get hurt." There was a moment of silence, then Holloway's voice rang out, closer than before he had reached the side of the house. "Perhaps we can still reach an accommodation," he called. "I'm a reasonable man. Name your price for the woman." "She's not for sale," Thomas replied fiercely. "And neither is her freedom." Another pause, then the sound of movement, running footsteps, a horse whinnying in alarm. Thomas risked a glance through his window and saw Holloway sprinting toward the house, using his injured men as cover, a revolver in his hand. "Sophia, he's coming in," Thomas warned, already moving to intercept him. He reached the front door just as Holloway burst through it, both men colliding with enough force to send them staggering. Holloway was surprisingly strong for his age and build, and his rage lent him additional power. He slammed Thomas against the wall, his revolver pressed to the cowboy's throat. "I'll kill you," Holloway hissed, his face contorted with fury. "I'll kill you and take her anyway." Thomas struggled against Holloway's grip, but the gun barrel dug painfully into his windpipe, making it difficult to breathe, let alone fight back effectively. "Victor." Sophia's voice cut through the tension like a knife. She stood in the doorway to the kitchen, her shotgun aimed squarely at Holloway's back. "Let him go, or I swear I'll shoot." Holloway froze but didn't release Thomas. "You won't shoot me, Sophia," he said, confidence in his voice despite the situation. "You don't have it in you to kill a man in cold blood." "You're right," Sophia agreed, her voice steady. "I've never wanted to hurt anyone, but you're not giving me a choice." She took a step forward. "I won't go back to you, Victor. Not ever. This is my home now. This is the man I love. If you force me to choose between your life and his, I choose him." Something in her tone must have convinced Holloway of her sincerity. His grip on Thomas loosened slightly, uncertainty flickering across his face for the first time. It was all the opening Thomas needed. With a sudden surge of strength, he knocked Holloway's gun hand upward, the revolver discharging harmlessly into the ceiling. The 2 men grappled, crashing into furniture as each fought for control of the weapon. Thomas was younger, stronger, but Holloway fought with the desperation of a man who had never accepted defeat. They crashed through the front door, onto the porch, still struggling for the gun. A shot rang out, and Thomas felt a searing pain along his ribs Holloway had managed to fire, the bullet grazing Thomas's side. With a roar of pain and determination, Thomas finally wrested the revolver from Holloway's grasp, flinging it away into the yard. His fist connected with Holloway's jaw twice, until the older man stumbled backward, blood streaming from his split lip. "It's over," Thomas panted, pressing one hand to his bleeding side. "Your men are down or running. You've lost." Holloway wiped blood from his mouth, hatred burning in his eyes. "It's never over," he spat. "I have connections you can't imagine. I'll bring the law down on you. Claim you kidnapped her, stole from me. I'll ruin you both." "No, you won't," came Sophia's voice from the doorway. She stepped onto the porch, her shotgun still in hand but lowered now. "Because if you try, I'll tell every newspaper from here to Denver what kind of man you really are, how you keep women, how you treat them." Her chin lifted defiantly. "Your reputation, your precious standing in society, it would all crumble." "Is that what you want, Victor?" Uncertainty crossed Holloway's face, quickly replaced by calculation. He straightened his ruined jacket, some of his composure returning. "You're bluffing," he said, but there was a hint of doubt in his voice. "Try me," Sophia challenged, stepping closer. "Or you can accept that I've moved on, that I want nothing more to do with you and leave us in peace." Holloway looked from Sophia to Thomas and back again, weighing his options. Finally, he gave a short, bitter laugh. "He won't make you happy, you know," he said to Sophia. "Men like him, they don't understand women like you. He'll bore you within a year." "That's a risk I'm willing to take," Sophia replied calmly. Holloway stared at her for a long moment, something almost like regret crossing his features. Then he straightened, his face hardening into its usual mask of control. "Keep her then," he said to Thomas. "But know this, if I ever see either of you in Denver, all bets are off." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked stiffly to his horse. His remaining men, seeing their employer retreat, began to do the same, helping their wounded comrades mount. Thomas and Sophia stood side by side on the porch, watching as Holloway and his men rode away, the dust from their horses' hooves golden in the light of the setting sun. "You think he'll keep his word?" Thomas asked quietly. "I think his pride matters more to him than I ever did," Sophia replied. "As long as he can tell himself he chose to let me go, that it was his decision." She shrugged. "He'll find someone else to control, someone younger, more compliant." Thomas put his arm around her waist, drawing her close. "Are you all right?" Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd be free of him," she whispered. "Not truly." She looked up at Thomas, wonder in her eyes. "But I am, aren't I? It's really over." "It's over," Thomas confirmed, kissing her forehead. "And something new is beginning." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Ordway, with Dr. Patterson and Sheriff Miller as witnesses. Sophia wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Thomas wore his best shirt and a new vest, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face as they spoke their vows. The ranch flourished under their care. Thomas bought cattle and horses, gradually building a respectable herd. Sophia's garden expanded from kitchen staples to include flowers and medicinal herbs, which she sold in town. Together, they repaired fences, painted the house, and turned the property into a true home. Word of Sophia's healing knowledge spread, and soon women from miles around were coming to her for remedies and advice. She discovered a gift for midwifery, bringing new life into the world with skilled hands and a compassionate heart. It was healing work, helping to erase the memories of her time with Holloway and replace them with purpose and pride. Thomas took to ranching as if born to it, his natural affinity with animals, an instinct for the land serving him well. Under his management, the ranch, which they named Sunnyside for the way the morning light bathed the eastern pastures in gold, became known for its quality stock and fair dealings. Their happiness was not without challenges. The work was hard, the weather sometimes cruel. There were droughts that threatened the crops, winters that endangered the herd. But they faced each obstacle together, their bond growing stronger with each shared struggle and triumph. A year after their marriage, as spring brought new growth to Sunnyside Ranch, Sophia discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled them both with joy and trepidation. Parenthood was uncharted territory, a new adventure neither had anticipated when their paths first crossed on that fateful day in Ordway. What if I'm not a good mother? Sophia worried one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset, a daily ritual they had maintained since their first days at the ranch. I didn't exactly have a normal upbringing. Thomas took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. You'll be an amazing mother, he assured her. You're kind, patient, strong, everything a child needs. And you'll be a wonderful father, Sophia replied, leaning against him. Our baby is lucky to have you. Their son was born on a crisp October morning in 1881. A healthy boy with his father's green eyes and a tuft of hair that promised to be the same golden shade as his mother's. They named him David James Summers, David for Thomas's father, and James for Sophia's brother, who traveled from Boston to meet his nephew and give his blessing to the sister whose sacrifices had made his education possible. Looking at her family, her husband cradling their son, her brother standing proudly beside them, Sophia felt a sense of completion she had never expected to find. The path that had brought her here had been painful, filled with darkness and fear. But it had led her to this moment, this life, this love. 2 years later, Sophia gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Michael and Elizabeth. The Summers family was complete, their home filled with laughter, occasional tears, and the endless energy of 3 active children. As the years passed, the memory of Victor Holloway faded, becoming nothing more than a shadow from a previous life. Occasionally, travelers from Denver would bring news Holloway had married a young woman from a wealthy family, had expanded his business interests, had suffered financial setbacks during a recession. But these stories no longer held power over Sophia. They were simply tales about a stranger who had once threatened her happiness, but ultimately failed. One summer evening in 1889, as Thomas and Sophia sat on their porch watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, Thomas asked a question that had long been on his mind. Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life instead of the comfort Holloway offered? Sophia looked around at their ranch, the sturdy house they had expanded to accommodate their growing family, the thriving garden, the healthy cattle grazing in distant fields. She thought of their children, strong and curious, growing up free under the Colorado sky. And she looked at Thomas, his face weathered by sun and work but still handsome, still looking at her with the same love and wonder he had shown on the day he caught her falling. Never, she said with complete conviction. Not for a single moment. Thomas smiled, taking her hand in his. Me neither, he said softly. Though sometimes I think about how close we came to never meeting, if you hadn't been running through Ordway that day, if I hadn't been in just that spot. I believe some things are meant to be, Sophia said, squeezing his hand. Of all the places I could have run to, all the moments when Holloway's man could have caught up to me, it happened there then with you nearby. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I was shot in the back while running and you caught me before I hit the ground. It was the worst moment of my life and the best because it brought me to you. To us, Thomas corrected gently, wrapping his arm around her. To this life we've built together. As darkness settled over Sunnyside Ranch, as their children's laughter echoed across the yard, Thomas and Sophia remained on the porch, their hands entwined, their hearts full. They had found in each other not just love, but partnership, strength, and a shared vision of what life could be. And it had all begun with a gunshot, a fall, and a cowboy who had been in the right place at exactly the right time to catch a woman who had been running all her life, until she found a reason to stay.